It's crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Steelers, Raiders, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Raiders coming at you. Chris Carter and your boy Q. We got a lot to talk about, but both of these teams going into this game 1-1 on Sunday night in Las Vegas, and both looking to still establish what their real identity will be this season. We'll talk about that, quarterbacks, edge rushers, receivers, all that and more here on the crossover Thursday episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, your boy Q from Locked On Raiders, getting you ready for Sunday Night Football as these two one-on-one teams throw down in Las Vegas. A reminder, this show is brought to you by Prize Picks on Crossover Thursday, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Remember, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to these channels for more on your teams. We give you your team every day here, whether it's Locked On Steelers, Locked On Raiders. Q, we're back, baby. We haven't done a Locked On NFL show for a bit because you doing big time stuff with ESPN. But it's always fun to do shows with you, brother. I'm glad to be back on the screen.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'll tell you off top, man, I had Raider Nation hit me up and say, you tell that Chris Carter, you tell that Locked On Steelers guy, there is only one nation. So I got that off top. I had to get that off to the top, right? That's what Raider Nation said. They told me to pass the message along, so I definitely had to do that. Not that they're wrong, because they're not wrong, but I just wanted to pass the message along. But it is good to be back with you.
I mean, they're all wrong. Literally, Steeler Nation Radio was established before Raider Nation Radio. But whatever, we don't have to get into that. It's fine. But let's get into talking about these teams right now. Both teams 1-1, and both teams, I think, neither could say they're satisfied with how they've looked in their first 2 weeks. And look, like a win is a win. Like the Steelers aren't going to apologize for winning the game against the Browns, but they're also not going to look at it positively and say, "Oh yeah, things are just hunky-dory right now," because they've been able to do it. But if you're the Raiders, you're probably feeling the same way. Yes, you eked out a win over the Broncos, a division win in week 1, and that's huge. But then, the Bills, you played the Bills on the road, and that was rough. You get your first home game right now. What is the identity of this Raiders team right now, and what do they want it to be?
Well, that's the thing about it, man. They're still trying to identify it. And I think that, and this is just me going off of what I believe based off of last year, I think they want to be a team that's able to have the power running game and then open it up and spread the ball around. Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers when he's healthy, Hunter Renfro's there, even though he hasn't been very much involved so far in the season. I believe it all starts, though, with Josh Jacobs, the guy who led the league in rushing a year ago. And, around this time of the season last year, the Raiders were trying to identify themselves as well. They were trying to figure out who they were. Were they going to be a pass team where they throw the ball around the yard a lot? Was it going to be led by Josh Jacobs? And at some point around week 4 or 5, Josh Jacobs identified himself, right, and made himself known as he is the identity of the team. And that's how they went the rest of the season. I believe that that's what they're trying to get back to this year, only with parts that are more familiar with Coach McDaniels and what they want to do, obviously led by quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo as opposed to Derek Carr. But so far through 2 weeks, that identity hasn't really been established yet. And for Josh Jacobs in that running game a week ago, 9 carries, -2 yards. That's not going to happen too often to a leading rusher, right, in the league. So that's obviously got to get cleaned up quick, fast, and hurry. And it's going to be a big challenge this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who we all saw on Monday night have a really good defense, and the defense lead the way to their win against the Browns. So it should be interesting to see the Raiders try to establish an identity this upcoming Sunday night. For the Steelers, Chris, what would you say you think the identity of the team is?
Man, it's the defense saving the offense's butts right now. That's the identity is. Help! Exactly. Like, please come and win this game. I was joking in the press box, but I wasn't joking. I was actually serious. But I said, at one point when the Browns took the lead back, I'm like, well, it looks like the Steelers defense is going to have to score 2 more touchdowns for them to win this game. They scored 1 more touchdown, but that's all they needed. And they scored 14 points in that last game. It's ridiculous how they did that. And they've done this a few times over the past few years where the defenses carry the team. But they're also carrying the team in a bit unconventional way right now. What should give the Raiders some hope right now, the Steelers are next to last in rushing defense right now. They've given up they've given up the 31st they're the 31st best at stopping the run right now. Granted, they went up
they're
against
not good, is what you're saying.
They're terrible. They're terrible right now. And part of it is they're dealing with some injuries. Cam Hayward was lost in the first half of the season, first half of the first game of the season, and he won't be back until the second half of the season. So there are some alarming bells there. They've got a whole new linebacker core. I do think that they're going to see a little bit of improvement on their part as they keep moving forward, because I think guys like Braden Fehoko are being promoted, and he's more of a run stuffer than Montravius Adams. I think Keanu Benton, the rookie they got out of Wisconsin, is stepping up. But this is a group that Mike Tomlin acknowledged that, like, we have not played the kind of football that we want to play yet when we talked to him on Tuesday. And that's despite the defensive pass rush being there and being helpful. And actually, I got to correct myself. They are dead last in rushing defense. I was looking at the rushing offense, which is next to dead last.
You hear that, Josh Jacobs? Do you hear that? Their running defense is not very good. Maybe that rush that I was talking about for the Raiders, maybe it gets established this week.
It needs to be established if you're the Raiders this week. If you don't do it against the Steelers and you let the Steelers run defense find its footing, it could become a long day. Offensively, the Steelers also still have a lot to prove there. They've hit on some touchdowns in their first couple games here. The 71-yard touchdown to George Pickens was a highlight of the game, but Kenny Pickett has not looked like the consistent quarterback we saw in the preseason and throughout training camp. He doesn't even look like the quarterback that we saw towards the end of last season, where he had 4 game-winning drives to help the Steelers find a winning record at the end of the season. But I do think part of that comes from this being an offense he's still adapting to NFL play, and he's played 2 very good defenses. The Niners defense, I think, might be the best in the NFL still. They were last year. They've looked pretty good to start this year. The Browns defense, a talented unit that gets after you with Jim Schwartz, their new defensive coordinator. What's the calling card of this Raiders defense right now, Q? Should the Steelers be alarmed by who they're about to face this week?
Well, I mean, they should be alarmed by number 98, right? I mean, number 98 is the guy that makes everything go for the Raiders defensively. That's Mad Maxx Crosby. The problem is who else is going to step up, right? And that really kind of reared its ugly head on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills. The Bills decided 98's not going to wreck the game. And Chris, we know that the NFL is a copycat league. So if they see kind of the blueprint of, all right, we're going to take this dude out and nobody else on that defense is going to step up, then it could be an easy day at the office, or at least an easier day at the office for the Steelers or any other offense that's going to attack the Raiders. So that's really what, it's like we were talking about the identity of the team and what they do offensively. The identity of the team has got to be, Maxx Crosby is obviously the leader, but who else could complement him? Who's going to be that guy is the big question. And somebody's got to step up and say, I got this, right? Or like the movie Life, I be the pappy, right? I be the pappy. Like, you know what I mean? And I don't quote movies very often, but I remember that one, right? And so somebody needs to step up and wave their hand and say, don't worry, I got you, Max. I'm going to compliment you. Chandler Jones, he's not going to be playing. He's probably not going to ever play for the Raiders again. He's got a lot of things going on off the field, and that's really all I know about that situation. They've got a young rookie in Tyree Wilson that they drafted number 7 overall. He was coming off an injury out of Texas Tech. Maybe he can start to establish himself. He didn't look very good against the Broncos in week 1. Looked a little bit better as far as get off week 2 against the Bills, but still was easily being blocked by offensive linemen. So somebody's got to step up and say, I could be a dominant force across from Maxx Crosby. But right now, as far as when you look at the Raiders defense, it's Maxx Crosby and everybody else.
Absolutely. I want to get more into those matchups because both teams are going to have to watch out for edge rushers in this game. But we also got to talk about the quarterback wide receiver situation. Raiders having some scares at injuries of wide receivers. The Steelers missing their top wide receiver, Deontay Johnson. We'll talk about the quarterbacks, the receivers, their connection on the other side of break here on the Crossover Thursday episode on the Locked On Podcast Network for Locked On Steelers and Locked On Raiders. We'll get to all of that in just a minute here, so stay tuned for all of our great conversations. But first, before we go anywhere else, I want to remind you that this show is sponsored by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You just need to play Prize Picks and you can win up to 25 times your money. And when we say made easy, all you're doing is picking more or less on 2 to 6 players that you select throughout the week. Prize Picks is a fun new daily fantasy game where you're not playing the field. You're not playing thousands of people trying to outscore them in fantasy football. You're just saying, hey, I think I have a bead on these 2 to 6 fantasy football players, and I think that they're going to get more or less than your Prize Picks projection. For example, if you think TJ Watt's going to get more than 1.5 sacks and that George Pickens is going to score more than half a touchdown on Sunday night, if you pick more on both of those and you hit, you'll get paid money on Prize Picks. And again, you can go from 2 to 6 players to increase how much money that you can make. You can also do what Prize Picks does and look for their different promotions like Taco Tuesday, where on every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% that you can get even more value on your Prize Picks winnings. Prize Picks also does the NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, and so much more. So download the Prize Picks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. And that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL to play with the code LockedOnNFL, all capital letters, all one word, for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. We're also brought to you by Jace Medical. The Jace Medical brings you what's called the Jace case, which provides you 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of your board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. This is doctor-created and doctor recommended. Don't be caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to take care of for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jace handles everything from online evaluations to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Jace Medical is simple. You go online, fill out a form, and then you get a prescription. Life-saving medications delivered right to your door. The Jace case gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting the life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on JaceMedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Again, JASE medical.com today to get your Jace case. Back here on Crossover Thursday, Locked On Steelers meets Locked On Raiders with Chris Carter and your boy Q, talking things here over here. Q, let's talk about these quarterbacks and receivers, because this is not new. Well, it's not new for the Steelers, but they're still trying to establish it here. As much as they're trying to establish an identity, both teams are looking to establish some connection. They've invested considerable value into making sure they have playmaker wide receivers. The Raiders made sure to trade for and pay Davante Adams. Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback they brought in. But Q, give us an update into Adams' status. I know he had he was being looked at for a concussion. Jacoby Myers was in question. How do both of them look going into the later part of the week?
Well, the good news is Davante's fine. Davante's good to go for Sunday. We found out on Monday, Josh McDaniels said Davante's good. He also said Jacoby Myers is still going through, his progressions as far as the concussion protocol. He had a legit concussion delivered by Kareem Jackson, who apparently he's in the business of causing concussions so far for the Denver Broncos 2 weeks in a row. Not only did he knock out Jacoby Myers, but then he turned around and knocked out the tight end from the Washington Commanders the very next week. So, that's a Kareem Jackson thing. But no, Jacoby Myers sounds like he's progressing pretty well, but Coach McDaniels wasn't willing to say, he's going to be back, for Sunday, just in case he has a kind of setback. But it feels like he's trending in the right direction. We'll probably know a lot more come Friday before they head into the weekend and get ready for the game on Sunday. But I'll tell you, the connection between Jimmy G and Jacoby was fantastic week 1. Obviously didn't play week 2. He's been on page with Davante both week 1 and week 2. Problem is, when it comes to the wide receivers and Jimmy G, that's really all it's been, right? There hasn't been a lot of spreading the ball around. And the other thing I'd like to say about it is the Raiders and their possessions have been really weird. Like week 1 against Denver, they only possessed the ball 6 times. And then week 2 against the Buffalo Bills, they played 13 snaps in the second half. So, you know what I mean? So it's not like they've really had the ball a lot. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. So maybe that's why the ball's not being spread around, but it's something that I'm paying attention to. And I think it's a big key that it has to open up. Hunter Renfrow, we know he's a really good wide receiver. He had a couple seasons ago over 100 catches. He has 1 target, Chris, 1 target.
That's crazy.
2 games. Right. So that's got to be opened up and established. And I asked Coach McDaniels about that on Monday, and he said, we had times where we could have hit Hunter and we didn't. So we've got to get him involved. So I think that relationship between Jimmy G and the playmakers is still developing. And that's what happens when you have a new quarterback. So that's definitely a storyline to watch going into this game. Can Jimmy G spread the ball around the yard to multiple guys outside of Davante Adams, potentially Jacoby Myers, and the check down to Josh Jacobs? That's going to be something to really monitor and pay attention to.
Absolutely. It's something that the Steelers are monitoring on their side. They're not, Kenny Pickett, for as much as the hype was going in for him into this season, he's been a bit of a disappointment in these first 2 games. So far, just two touchdown passes, 3 interceptions thrown. And you look at how things have played out. Yes, Deontay Johnson has missed a game and a half now, and he will miss about 3 more games at least. He'll probably be gone until after the bye week, as he's on injured reserve right now for the Steelers. But I will say George Pickens has stepped up. He had over 100 yards last week, 127 exactly, with a touchdown for the Steelers, and looked like the playmaker that they drafted him to be out of Georgia, the guy that was overlooked because of his ACL injury going into his senior season. I'll also say that the Steelers, I think they like what they see out of Allen Robinson and Calvin Austin, but they haven't really unlocked them yet as potential as guys who can be playmakers. Both just have 7 receptions. Robinson's with 76 yards. Austin with 47. The Steelers also seem to like throwing to their backup running back, Jaylen Warren, who has 78 yards on 9 catches. But the thing is with Kenny Pickett, he came into this season, I'm emphasizing, not trying to force the ball anywhere, trying to make the right decisions. And in the preseason, it looked like it worked. And even against, yes, some of those games were against backups, but those were the Bills starters that he was picking apart and looking very confident in how he was attacking the field. But now that he's faced 2 of the more aggressive defenses in the NFL, I think that he's kind of, taken his lumps, and he's been humble about it. He's been like, hey, I have to be better. This is on me. He's not blaming anyone else. Even though Steelers fans want offensive coordinator Matt Canada fired, they were chanting that at the end of the Steelers-Browns game. It was pretty loud. But Kenny Pickett is a guy, again, I covered him at the University of Pittsburgh. I've covered him every year that he's been with the Steelers so far. And in my time watching him over the past 4+ years, I've seen him take accountability, and that's what makes him better, is that he doesn't shy away from his own challenges. That's why Mike Tomlin likes him so much. I think Mike Tomlin identifies with that, and it's going to be one of the things where now that you're not facing a team that has some of the best cornerbacks in the NFL like the Browns do, or doesn't have a team of pass rushers like the Niners do. The Maxx Crosby's a problem, and we'll get to him and Tyree Wilson in a bit, but this needs to be a week where Kenny Pickett does find his footing and at least puts together a solid performance. He has not been good in either of these first 2 games. George Pickens, I think, in the first game didn't have the chance to be good. He was given the chance in the second game and showed, hey, I can be that guy. Kenny Pickett just has to give him the chance to be.
How important is it? I'm glad you brought up George Pickens. How important is it to get him involved in the game early, as opposed to having him kind of linger out there on the field and, hey, by the way, here I am, and then all of a sudden him get the ball late? Like how should it be a priority for Kenny to get the ball to him like early, maybe on the first drive?
I think it's vital, because not only for George Pickens himself, but for this entire offense. They're looking for confidence right now. This is still a very young offense. Kenny Pickett in his second year, George Pickens in his second year, Najee Harris in his third year, Pat Freiermuth in his third year, Dan Moore in his third year. Like this is a group overall that is still looking to build an identity with a lot of upside to it. Calvin Austin, is his second year, but first year playing because he missed all of last season. This is a group that's looking to show, hey, we can be this balanced threat. But to be balanced, you have to be able to hit in the run and the pass game. And right now, the way I see it, the Browns and the Niners both just dared the Steelers, please throw the ball. They played the line of scrimmage. They loaded the box. Their linebackers were flying to the line of scrimmage. We will not let Najee Harris take over the game, because we know what he can do when you just let him have space. Kenny Pickett, you have to beat us. And I think that needs to be the Raiders' path in this game. They need to plug up the run. Robert Spillane, he knows all about the Steelers. He's the new linebacker. Mike Tomlin was giving him praises during his Tuesday press conference. That defense needs to make sure that Najee Harris in that run game can't get off. And they need to challenge Kenny Pickett. Hey, can you beat us with your arm? Because you really didn't do it in the first 2 games. And if they do that, that could be what makes this game very interesting to see, and to see which side cracks something first on offense.
I like it. It's a hell of a recipe right there, and I think that that's the one that they need to go with. That's the approach that they need to go with, and make Kenny Pickett show that he can get it to Pickens, get it to the rest of their weapons, right? And the weapons are there. They just got to go ahead and make that connection. So if a team is struggling offensively, you still make it difficult. Whatever their area of lacking, right? Lacking the big time plays. You got to go ahead and exploit that. So that's going to be an interesting little matchup. The Raiders defense and the Steelers offense. Like, how do you make Kenny Pickett operate, right? Do you let him get comfortable, or do you kind of put some pressure on him? Do you stop the run and say, all right, it's on you, youngster, and see what he can do? And if he does it, then you tip the cap and you say, job well done. I think that's a hell of a recipe right there.
Absolutely. As I said last week, edge rushers are key to the game, and that could be what defines this game yet again with Maxx Crosby, TJ Watt, but also the guys next to them in Alex Highsmith and Tyree Wilson. We'll get to that on the other side of the break here on Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, your boy Q from Locked On Raiders, breaking things down. But first, before we go anywhere else, we want to remind you this show is also sponsored by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs are here to make you look good. They use stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer on you through the thigh and the leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit better than any regular shorts and aren't made of a stiff restricting cotton. Instead, they're made with cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so that you get a way slimmer fit through without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs use an anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So right now, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL and you'll receive a free water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free water bottle. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. Back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, your boy Q from Locked On Steelers and Locked On Raiders. Q, last week I told Jeff Lloyd, I said, listen, everything else aside, Kenny Pickett, Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, whoever,
right,
is going to be decided by edge rushers. And lo and behold, I didn't think it meant that TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith would both score touchdowns. I didn't think it was going to be like that.
Right. Yeah.
But it was the case. They did make the difference, and they won the game for the Steelers. I think the same thing could be the case this week because with the Browns, you had Zadarius Smith and you had Myles Garrett, and clearly the Steelers edge rushers won out in that game. But I don't think the Steelers can afford to overlook the Raiders pass rushers and Maxx Crosby and Tyree Wilson. Tyree Wilson, a top 10 pick this past year. Chandler Jones, whatever he's going through, and he would be a problem if he was ready to go. But Tyree Wilson was drafted high. What does he look like, and how does this pass rush look like with the Raiders so far?
Tyree Wilson's been okay, right? I think most of Raider Nation would say that he hasn't looked good at all, right? I mean, I think that he started to improve a little bit last week against Buffalo as far as his get off, at least. You know, you can see that he wasn't taking as long to like I say, get off the line of scrimmage and attack the play, but he still wasn't really involved. He had some hustle. You see that he's got some power and some burst, but he's got to be able to put it all together. So it's a work in progress with him. Maxx Crosby, again, you know what he's going to do. He's going to go 150 miles an hour. That's just kind of what he's done. That's why his name is Max, and he's got 2 X's. I mean, it's that extra energy, extra everything that he brings to the table. I really think a guy like Jerry Tillery, who had a sack week 1 against Denver, is going to have to step up. A guy like Bilal Nichols, somebody, a Malcolm Kuntz, somebody's got to step up and be that guy. Like, I don't want to put all the pressure on Tyree Wilson right now, even though, as you said, he was a top 10 pick, and that's why they draft him, right? If you pick him in the top 10, you expect him to be a difference maker. I think they're playing the long game with Tyree. I don't think it's going to be a, immediate a reaction and immediate satisfaction when it comes to Tyree. So someone else is going to have to fill in that void, and that's going to be very interesting. I really believe that this game is going to be won in the trenches, and it's going to have some kind of Max is going to have some kind of help, but also the Raiders offensive line is going to obviously have their work cut out for them as far as, like you said, Highsmith and TJ Watt. The one thing I can say about the offensive line so far for the Raiders, they haven't given up a sack yet this season. So, Jimmy G's been able to stay upright. Now, he's had some pressure. The Bills got some pressure on him last week. There was a couple times where he got a little hairy in the pocket, but he's been able to stand tall and deliver the ball somewhere. If it's a check down, Davante, whatever the case may be, he's been able to get at least the ball out of his hands. So, if that offensive line can continue to hold up, Colton Miller and Jermaine Illuminor have been the bookend tackles right now. If they can hold up against two of the best, I should say, pass rushers in the league with TJ Watt and, of course, Highsmith, who they basically single-handedly wrecked the game Monday night against the Browns. If they can do that, then the Raiders have a fighting chance in this game. But if those guys get off early and often, it could be a long day at the office at Allegiant Stadium.
And look, Jimmy Garoppolo has played the Steelers before with the Niners. He knows the deal. Get the ball out fast. That's how you try to beat. That's what Brock Purdy did with the Niners really well in week 1. Deshaun Watson, not so much. He held onto the ball a lot and put the Steelers pass rushers kept them from wrecking the game, even though TJ Watt still ended up with 3 sacks and a forced and recovered fumble in that game. TJ Watt is going to get his. And I think that that's one of the things that teams kind of have to realize, but you have to try to neutralize as best you can. And this goes back to the Raiders' best recipe, I think, for trying to neutralize what the Steelers really do well at the edge rusher position is running the football, staying ahead of the chains, not giving the Steelers 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 to defend, where Watt and Highsmith can pin their ears back and say, "We're coming, Jimmy," and Jimmy has to then look out for things. I think that is the Raiders' key for today. And the Steelers, you have to be able to stuff the run. They brought up, like I said, they brought up Braden Fajoko on the defensive line. They've been looking for answers in the absence of Cam Hayward to try to do something to stop the run. I think that they showed some signs of improvement in week 2, but they still showed lots of issues because they gave up another 60-yard plus run. Granted, Levi Wallace was kind of responsible for his giving up his gap on a busted play, but I really think that the Steelers defense, this needs to be a week where they can show on, like we talked about the Steelers offense, they need to show who they are. The Steelers defense needs to show who they are. They've shown they can make big plays, and we know they can make big plays. We got to see the injury status of Minkah Fitzpatrick. He had a chest scare, but Mike Tomlin said he was fine out of the hospital, and the Steelers trainers have been looking at him. We don't know his status yet for this week, but the Steelers need an all-hands-on-deck performance to show that this defense can be an elite unit. They finished in the top 10 last year. If they can't do that again this year, this team is in a good deal of trouble.
Well, I'll tell you right now, when it comes to the Raiders defense, they need to show up and show who they are, right? There was a lot of times during training camp when I said, okay, this team is going to look for the ball. They're trying to create turnovers, interceptions, strip sacks, whatever the case may be. They're trying to get their hands on the ball. They don't create very many turnovers. Well, they need to start establishing that. They haven't created any turnovers yet this season. They have 4 sacks on the season, so that's okay. Could be a lot better, but they've got to establish themselves, right? I mean, and that's why I said that this game is going to be won in the trenches, on both sides of the ball. I think, as you mentioned earlier in the show, the Raiders defense has to step up and try to slow down or stop Najee Harris. Don't let him wreck the game on the ground. Make Kenny Pickett be that guy. And if you can try to make Kenny throw the ball around the yard, then you have an opportunity to make a play. And again, they talked about it. They preached it all offseason, all training camp, all preseason. Go get ball, see ball, get ball, go hunt the ball. They haven't hunted the ball yet. So they're going to have to establish that. Again, if the Raiders are going to win this game, and I think that, this is going to be a good, evenly matched game between the Steelers and the Raiders at Allegiant Stadium. I'm excited to see it. I think that there's got to be some turnovers, just like what, you saw Pittsburgh do on Monday night, create some turnovers. Not only did they create turnovers, they scored points. I ain't saying that the Raiders got to score points, but they've got to create some turnovers in this game. They've got to start establishing themselves as a team that can go and find the ball. So the trenches and creating some plays on the back end is what's really going to do it for the Raiders. For the Steelers to win this game, Chris, like what has to happen? Like what is the bare bones has to happen for them to win?
Bare bones, they need to be able to put up at least 2 touchdowns on offense. They got to show that they can score multiple touchdowns in a single game this week, and they got to still be turnover creators. They got to limit the run and create the turnovers off that. It all starts with limiting the run. The Steelers have talked about that for years. That is their emphasis. If they allow Josh Jacobs to take over this game, they're in a lot of trouble. Now, granted, they faced the Raiders just last year. They should know this, right? Like they went up against them, and it was a great defensive game at Acrisure Stadium late last season. But the
cold
Raiders
game.
it was cold. Yeah, I was out there for that one.
But I'm glad you were. I was not. That was a cold, man. That's the only way I could describe that. A cold ass game.
that was a cold game. But this won't be cold. It'll be in a dome. It'll be in Vegas. Exactly. It'll be in their environment. And this is somewhere the Steelers haven't played before. This is, I think, the Raiders recently opened this stadium. And typically, historically, the Steelers have had trouble with the Raiders, even when the Raiders have been very bad and the Steelers have been very good. Like the Raiders might get 2 wins in the season, and one of them would be the Steelers in a year that the Steelers were like 11-5 or something like that. So the Steelers have to avoid any chances that bad mojo impacts anything. They have to stuff the run. Start fast on offense, get at least 2 touchdowns. And if they stuff the run, they'll put themselves in position to get after the quarterback and play their style of defense. If the Raiders are able to establish the run, I think that changes this dynamic entirely, and it could really come down to just which offense finds its consistency more often in this game.
I think it's an evenly matched game. I really do. I mean, obviously the Steelers have their strengths and they have their weaknesses, and the Raiders have their strengths as well, and they have plenty of weaknesses too, right? I mean, they're still trying to establish themselves, and that's kind of, Chris, the beautiful thing about playing in week 3 of the NFL season. I think all teams are still trying to develop who they are, right? Nobody is a finished product just yet at this point of the season. So it's going to be a good one, man. I'm looking forward to it at Allegiant Stadium. All eyes will be on this game, right? It's primetime action Sunday night. So it's the last game in town. It's the only game in town. So we'll definitely all be paying attention. But I do think it's going to be a hell of a game.
Absolutely. He's your boy Q from Locked On Raiders. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Man, they can find me in the hood. No, I'm just kidding. They can find me on Twitter at your boy Q254. Of course, everything that I do, all the radio shows, all the podcasts, always have a link to them right there on my Twitter account at your boy Q254. What about you, Chris?
Absolutely. He's great. I'm so glad to do other shows with you again, Q. I miss doing Locked On NFL with you on Fridays, but schedules be rough, bro. But we'll get it up again soon. He's your boy Q. I'm Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can also read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all my coverage on the University of Pittsburgh, as well as the Steelers there. You can also find me here on the Locked On Podcast Network, just like you find Q, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Raiders on all your favorite podcasting apps on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to both of our channels if you want to get more everyday access on the Steelers or the Raiders leading up to Sunday Night Football. We both got another show coming back where we'll give our final predictions and outlook on the game. So stay tuned on the Locked On Podcast for Locked On Steelers and Locked On Raiders. We'll see you Friday right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.